He has proceeded off to the weekend, and I so understand that. But let's shift to matters biz chat. And today we have a very powerful panel. They look set for the year. Hey, gentlemen, Ramogi, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you.
You went for holidays now. You look lighter. Yeah? You look like an angel on our screens. Look at the white. Yeah, but good to see you. How's the year been for you so far?
Wonderful. I started the year in the village somewhere in Siaya County. Got back to the city this week. So I'm trying to acclimatize.
Very, very important. You know, the village, the air is cleaner.
Absolutely.
Nairobi is another one. But Ken, you've been in Nairobi the whole while.
Right.
Are you planning to go to the village?
Absolutely not. I think I'll be sticking to the city.
Yes.
And really looking forward to a good, engaging year.
Definitely. So at this particular moment, we have the draft budget policy statement, the first one for the Kenya Kwanza government. Quite a document right there. And I believe they might be stepping towards the right direction on some issues, the wrong direction on others, and others are what we are used to. Those elements that you've picked from this draft budget policy statement will be critical. And I want to start with you, Ken. So, you know, I wish, because you used to do modeling when you were in camps. Ken used to model, imagine. Yeah, so Ken's going to walk all the way and is going to give us his key 3 takeaways from this BPS and what stood out for him and why. Is that important, Ken?
Absolutely.
Very possible?
Thank
you. Please, come on. I can even hand you the tab. In case you're in the village, you forgot how to use it. Here it is. Here are your pointers. Please proceed.
Well, thank you very much, Noah, and the team. The budget policy statement really is an element of fiscal policy. And fiscal policy is a part of economic policy. So I think at the start of this year, it's very important to ask ourselves, what is the role of economic policy? Why do we study economics? Why do we have economists in our society? And we'll say that there are very many roles of economic policy. But I think the most important role of economic policy is to enhance the creation of jobs. That has to be number one. There are many other objectives, but the creation of jobs, that is the number one role of economic policy. Jobs that give people dignity, jobs that give people a livelihood. And it's very important that we stick to that, because very often economic policy makers will tell us about a list of leading economic indicators. We hear about GDP, about inflation, about budget deficits. All these are partially important, but they need to be linked to job creation. It's very possible. In fact, the challenge of the previous administration is they were facing an economy that is growing GDP-wise, but wasn't creating enough jobs for the people. So that is one of the most important things. And that's why when you go to countries such as the United States, every first Friday of the month, they will actually mention which jobs were created in the previous month of that particular period. Now, moving on to the next issue is the issue of why now we have assumed that job creation is the most important aspect of economic policy. We have to ask, how do we create jobs? And jobs can only are primarily created in the private sector. The government can only hire about maybe 700 to 800,000 civil servants in a population of about 50 million people. So the private sector has to be at the heart of job creation, particularly small businesses. And small businesses can only create jobs when they're expanding, when they're growing, when they're hiring more people, which means that the customers for these businesses have to have purchasing power, have to be able to purchase, to afford what the businesses are providing. And that's the challenge of when the state starts increasing VAT on goods and services. Goods become more expensive, whether it's on your airtime, whether it's on your M-Pesa transactions. Goods become and services become more and more expensive. Therefore, consumers consume less and producers produce less. And therefore, it means even those producers, those businesses, have to reduce operations and have to lay off people, which goes against really what I said earlier, the economic policy objectives. And that's why it's very important to reflect on what economics refers to as the Laffer curve, that phenomenon that happens when you increase VAT and excise goods on fuel, on airtime, on packaging material, and you find you're collecting less revenue. It's because the price point becomes more expensive, so fewer people are able to transact. So to remove these VATs and excise taxes, which are called consumption taxes. Now, one of the most exciting things of the Kenya Kwanza manifesto last year in the run-up to the election is they promised that we need to move our tax policy from regressive consumption-based taxes towards progressive tax policies. Progressive tax policies really mean taxes that are proportionate to your station in life. You know, as they say, to whom much is given, much is expected. So things like income tax need to be progressive, and we need to get more people into employment, because when you have more people into employment, the government can collect more income tax, more corporation tax, even on the property side, more property tax. But we are not seeing much of that in the budget policy statement. If anything, we are seeing an extension of what has been happening really in Kenya for the last, I'd say, 60 odd years. So for me, I think it's a disappointment. I think we need to go back to that tax policy again, that promise of moving the country towards more progressive tax laws, reducing our reliance on consumption taxes, and really being able to push the country into more prosperity.
All right.
Thank you, Noah. Yeah.
Ken, hey, you're a guru, man. You've done this very well. So if you may
Thank
just...
you.
Wow, Ramogi, that's where you clap and yeah, you know, there's this quote they say, that men, we get our flowers only when? Yes. So it's time to give more flowers. Ken, that was a very nice presentation. And you've raised very key points right there. You conclude by saying that that is quite a disappointing budget policy statement draft, but I hope you've given your feedback, because they've been receiving feedback in this regard. Absolutely. Which is very important here. At this particular moment, the man who, based on his presentation, he has a military background, because he was talking about hits and misses in this particular, budget policy statement, is none other than Diambo Ramogi. Diambo, please approach. I don't know whether you have a modeling background, but yeah. So here we have you've been at the village, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. But let me see. Where are the misses? There we go. So you start
with the hits, and then we come to the misses.
Definitely, you have to hit, then you go to the misses. The floor is yours, Diambo.
Thank you. Well, as my colleague has said, the budget policy statement of this administration is the first document that gives us an insight into the Kenya Kwanza administration and economic policy moving forward. There are, in fact, hits and misses. It's a balanced one. I wouldn't say it's all bad. I would say there are good things. First is the fidelity to the Kenya Kwanza manifesto. This means that the Kenya Kwanza manifesto was attractive in its outlook and has been, celebrated as being one of the best manifestos that was presented to Kenyans last year. And so it is within our interest to see that that manifesto is in fact implemented. The budget policy statement ensures the budget policy statement ensures that there is a fidelity to the 5 items: agriculture, MSMEs, healthcare, housing and development, and the technology aspect. And I think that's a good thing. The second thing is the economic outlook. The IMF director said something to the effect that because other countries globally are going to struggle this year, therefore developing economies will also struggle and will see less growth. I do not concur. I do not agree to this outlook. And I think that the budget policy statement released by Treasury appreciates the fact that our country has developed resilience over the years, and that our economic outlook looks very attractive in terms of a 6.1% growth. That's a good thing. The third thing is debt management. We are moving further and further away from excess debt and excess borrowing, and I think that's a very good thing. We have saved around 119 billion in this specific financial year, moving away from the era where we borrowed beyond what is actually allocated in budget. And that's attractive. I'm looking forward to more and more debt management, progressive debt management. This also means, of course, that we hope that the budget deficits that we've seen in the past will reduce, because right now we are looking at 4.3, while the regionally accepted level is 3% deficit of GDP. Now, there are also misses to this budget, this budget policy that I think needs to be appreciated and highlighted. One is there is a focus, and I think the primary focus of this policy statement is revenue expansion with better fiscal management, greater tax expansion of a tax base. And I think that's a good thing, because we need tax to be able to take care of ourselves and to provide for the needs that the economy has. However, there are poor controls. Historically, the problem at KRA has been poor governance, leakages, tax evasion in cahoots with some of the officers there. We do not see a strong focus in terms of the policy statement that we need to see more controls at KRA. And I think that would mean that we will collect more taxes, yes, but we will lose it through corruption and poor governance. The second thing we've seen is the M-Pesa integration. Now, this sounds like a good thing in terms of the tax net, but the people that are being targeted by the M-Pesa integration are mostly the lower middle class and the people at the bottom of the pyramid that depend on M-Pesa for their savings, for their expenditure, and etc. These people are already overtaxed. And here, I would agree with my colleague Ken Gishinga that the Laffer curve effect would be felt as more and more people will try to find ways of evading tax, because the tax burden is already too much. And this will especially be the case because, one, there is overdependency in this economy. Too many people depend on one person earning. And two, there is unemployment, high unemployment levels that will push more people to avoid taxes. If this money that was being collected from M-Pesa would be reinvested in the economy, that would mean more economic growth, it would mean more money in the pockets of people. But more often than not, this money ends up in China in payment of debts and in payment of contractors, foreign contractors, that have taken the lion's share of Kenyan expenditure. Finally, the division of revenue. I am unhappy because we are looking at a division of revenue of 380 billion, which means that the Kenya Kwanza administration will proceed with the strangulation of devolution, as has been the case. For example, the money given to KEMSA, the money given to Kenya Rural Roads, the money given to some of these people, some of these national parastatals ought to be given to the county governments, because those functions are in fact devolved. You do not see that change of attitude, that change of approach in this budget policy statement. It's all systems go as has been, so shall it be. And I think that is a big miss. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
You see what Ken is doing? Makofi.
But I clapped.
Your Excellency, you guys remember those days we used to clap? Moja, Mtukufu. You know, those days, I miss those days.
I hope you don't get there, man.
Fungua.
I know. So the hits, the misses. And just looking at this particular budget policy statement and juxtapose that with the promises that we saw, because we understand the Kenya Kwanza government actually ran on the promise that, you know, it's a hustler narrative. How can we revive the economy from the bottom up? Is this too much of a contrast, and should we be expecting you know, a final draft that is totally different from this proposition? Ken?
It is a contradiction, because who is a hustler? A hustler is a small business owner who's trying to get by with his small business. And if you look at the policies, particularly when you're very heavy on some of these taxes such as VAT and excise tax, what you're going to do to that small business is you're going to make it sell less, because the customers will not be able to afford the services. So if I'm selling, let's say I'm selling small things like biscuits, for example, and you slap a 16% tax on that, it means I have fewer customers. So you're not really benefiting me in the sense that, you know, I should be prospering in this administration, but you actually feel that you're not really in a position that's any different from what you've had in the past.
Definitely. Ramogi, I mean, there's that quote, you can't tax your way to a successful nation. But again, the government is saying this is an explore. Like, look at those gaps in corporate tax. They're saying they want to thin those gaps. Look at the gaps in VAT. They want to thin that. Look at the potential of the informal sector. They say it holds a potential of 2.8 trillion shillings in terms of revenue. They want to tap into that. How do you balance between tax as the main approach towards reaching your goal vis-a-vis sort of incentivizing more resources and more productivity within the economy?
That's a very good question. If you look at most of the Scandinavian countries, the tax levels are very high. I think the last time I checked, Finland has a tax level pay of around 40%. But you look at the service delivery, man, it's awesome. The roads are good, healthcare is free, education is free. In other words, there is motivation for you to pay tax, because, you know, this tax comes back to me in form of some of these services. The same is not true in Kenya. And even in instances where we've said free primary education, you find that there are many other things that parents pay through the CBC, required equipment, materials, etc. And so there is no motivation, there is just no inspiration for you to pay taxes, because you do not see it reflecting in service delivery. Now, in terms of, again, small businesses being affected and the small person being affected, at the end of the day, you find that, you know, the taxes are too many, and they are spread across board, while the people with resources that need to be taxed, the guys, the corporates, the high net worth individuals, have capacity to find ways of evading tax or avoiding tax at all. And so I think the government needs to find ways of taxing high net worth individuals, whether it's through capital gains tax or it's through corporate taxes being more focused. But I'm not sure that they're getting it right as of now. Definitely.
Our time has come to an end in less than 30 seconds. Ken, I know you said this was quite disappointing. Briefly, your expectation in terms, I mean, it's just a draft, yeah? Your expectation in terms of the changes and some of the suggestions that you've placed here. What will be the biggest change that you expect to see in this draft, briefly?
Well, I think they need to reflect on their manifesto. And that manifesto, if you read it very clearly, it really talks about a tax policy that is progressive. So focusing more on your corporate income tax, on your income tax, focusing on their property tax that needs to be collected, the high net worth individuals who don't pay their fair share to the economy, and reducing the burden on the people at the very bottom, because consumption taxes tend to affect the people at the bottom disproportionately more. So that shift towards more of progressive tax laws, I hope to see a bit more of that.
Definitely. Ramogi, is this a hustler budget?
Not quite. I think there is an attempt, but we are not quite yet there in terms of their fiscal approach. In terms of investment, they want to invest in food security, agriculture, MSMEs. Yes, there is the willingness, there is the vision. The vision is right, just the how. Because even if you look at MSMEs, Hustler Fund can't do it. We have the gaps in terms of marketing, we have the gaps in terms of skills, and etc. And I think that is yet to be achieved.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. The Clap to you for an awesome presentation. Next Friday will be better. Odhiambura Mogi, Ken Gishinga on matters based chat and draft budget policy statement. We take a short break. We'll return with more. Stay tuned. You've done very well.